problem for the Canadian poet is a very difficult one. He's removed from the great issues of the day. His dilemmas are unimportant and derivative. But the contemporary poet must find some way into the living, fermenting core of the present. He cannot be merely an observer. Otherwise, what he says will be insignificant and unmoving.
Priest. I first became aware of Irving Layton when I was 19 years old. I went into the City Hall library and discovered his collected poems. And at that time, I had recently also discovered another poet, Jim Morrison of The Doors, and they both seemed like rock gods of the same ilk to me. Dionysian wild men sent to shake up the world. So when I finally met Irving, and this is odd because it was in this very room, I think it was right about where that's his granddaughter, Jessica. Right where Jessica is sitting, that's pretty much where Irving was sitting in the old reading situation with the stage over there. And so when I first met Irving, how delightful for me that he embraced me and affirmed my talent. Now, I should qualify that by saying that I had just read a poem about how great Irving is, but with no insincerity, I assure you. And after that, we became good friends, and I met him many times over the years. And, oh, by the way, that poem, the poem I wrote for him, I will not recite tonight, but I did bring 10 copies, and I will give you a copy if you like Juvenilia. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, and so I got to hang out with Irving, and every time, this is the truth, every time I was ever with Irving, he presented himself with joy and generosity. I never had a bad moment with him, and I feel blessed for that and eternally grateful. Sometimes we would recite poems back and forth, dare I say it, like equals. And he once talked me down from a dire and persistent anxiety and sent me packing with a smile of relief on my face. So I love the guy, and I still miss him. And but we wouldn't be here today if this was all about his personality. It's the greatness of the poetry. And this first poem of his that I'd like to recite, I had the pleasure of hearing him read with Elizabeth Smart and Rosemary Sullivan at a party. And I'll try to do it justice. It's a bit long, but I've timed it and it's going to fit. And I have a strong feeling that it was for Aviva. Yeah, it was for Aviva. So this is called With the Money I Spend. With the money I spend on you, I could buy ice cream for Korean kings. I could adopt a beggar and clothe him in scarlet and gold. I could leave a legacy of dolls and roses to my grandchildren. Why must you order expensive Turkish cigarettes? And why do you drink only the most costly champagne? The Leninists are marching on us. Their eyes are inflamed with social justice. Their mouths are contorted with the brotherhood of man. Their fists are heavy with universal love. They have not read a line of Mayakovsky's poems for 12 whole months. The deprivation has made them desperate. With staring eyeballs, they hold off, waiting for the ash from your cigarette to fall. That is a signal. When the ash crumbles, the man with the smallest forehead will smash a cracked hourglass, the sound amplified into 1,000 manifestos. Can you not see them? Can you not hear them? Already they are closing in on us. Your fragrant body means nothing to them. Under your very eyes, velvet and remarkable, they intone that beauty is not absolute. They shout for an unobstructed view of your shoulders, your proud and beautiful head gone. They will break your arms and slender legs into firewood. The golden, delicate hairs I have kissed into fire 1,000 times will blaze more brightly. But who will bend down to gather the flames into their mouth? Who will follow their white light into eternity? Because I love you better than artichokes and candles in the dark, I shall speak to them. Perhaps they will overlook your grace for my sake and ignore the offending perfection of your lips. Perhaps, after all, you and I will start a mass conversion into elegance. I will tell them my father made cheese and was humble and poor all his life, and that his father before him turned ill at the mere sight of money, and that a certain remote ancestor of mine never saw money at all, having been born blind. On my mother's side, they were all failures. Calliopes will sound from my undistinguished lineage, and the aroused Leninists will at once guess I am a fool in love, a simpleton, an ensnared and deranged proletarian with no prospects but the wind, which exposes my terrible hungers to them, my counter-revolutionary appetite to be lost from all useful labor in your arms, hair, thighs, navel, and parting the clouds, one solitary star, to show them where I am slain, counting the gold coins for your Turkish cigarettes and costly champagne. I was going to read on having been bitten by a dog, but I realized that nobody has chosen the improved binoculars, which is about the same length. So I'm going to read that one. Below me, the city was in flames. The firemen were the first to save themselves. I saw steeples fall on their knees. I saw an agent kick the charred bodies from an orphanage to one side, marking the site carefully for a future speculation. Lovers stopped short of the final spasm and went off angrily in opposite directions, their elbows held by giant escorts of fire. Then the dignitaries rode across the bridges under an oracle of light, which delighted them, noting for later punishment those that went before. And the rest of the populace, their mouths distorted by an unusual gladness, bawled thanks to this comely and ravaging ally, asking only for more light with which to see their neighbor's destruction. All this I saw through my improved binoculars. What? Oh, Max wants me to do on being bitten by a dog, so I will. Oh, page 54. I was speaking at a library protest today, by the way. Just that's still going on. They're still cutting librarians. Let's stop that. That's how I became aware of Irving Layton. So here's on being bitten by a dog. A doctor, for mere lucre, performed an unnecessary operation, making my nose nearly as crooked as himself. Another, for a similar reason, almost blinded me. A poet, famous for his lyrics of love and renunciation, toils at the seduction of my wife. And the humans who would like to kill me are legion. Only once have I been bitten by a dog.
Poet. Life knocks him on the head and makes him sing like a tuning fork.
As a young poet, I was just enthralled in 1959-60 with Red Carpet to the Sun. I got it out of the library, I kept it out of the library. I think it may even be in my shelves. I'm not sure. But I was a student at the time of, in the early 1960s, of Robert Creeley. And I was talking to Robert Creeley one day about Irving Layton and this book, Red Carpet to the Sun, and how excited a lot of us poets in Vancouver in the early 60s were about people like Irving Layton down east kind of making Canadian poetry finally come alive. And Crilly pulled out this book that he had published in 1954, In the Midst of My Fever, published in Mallorca by Divers Press, which was turned out to be, I think, Irving Layton's first public book of poetry. He had published, I think, a number of his own, but this was the first market book. Anyway, Northrop Frye, in a review of In the Midst of My Fever, comments, "At last it is possible to see what kind of poet Mr. Layton is, and he proves not to be a satirist at all, but an erudite elegiac poet whose technique turns on an alignment of the romantic and the ironic, and whatever lapses in expression one may find are of little importance when one is so constantly in touch with a poetic mind of genuine dignity and power." So saith Northrop Frye. I'd like to read a poem from that book, In the Midst of My Fever, The Birth of Tragedy. And me happiest when I compose poems. Love, power, the chutzpah of battle, or something, are much. Yet a poem includes them like a pool, water and reflection. In me, nature's divided things, tree, mold on tree, have their fruition. I am their core, let them swap, bandy like a flame swerve. I am their mouth, as a mouth I serve. And I observe how the sensual moths, big with odor and sunshine, dart into the perilous shrubbery or drop their visiting shadows upon the garden I one year made of flowering stone to be a footstool for the perfect gods, who, friends to the ascending orders, will sustain this passionate meditation and call down pardons for the insurgent blood. A quiet madman, never far from tears, I lie like a slain thing under the green air the trees inhabit, or rest upon a chair towards which the inflammable air tumbles on many robins' wings, noting how seasonably leaf and blossom uncurl, and living things arrange their death, while someone from afar off blows birthday candles for the world. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the world premiere of a video by Leonard Cohen.
To do right now is to preserve the self. That's his real concern. I think that is the concern for every poet, to preserve the self in a world that is rapidly steamrolling the selves out of existence and establishing a uniform world.
All right, we've got your concern. Your concern is Irving Layton and his survival, even more than the survival of the mass of the
And
human
Cohen's
race.
concern is my renunciation of the Canadian public.
Is this true, or have you some other concern, Mr. Cohen, that you'd like to get off your chest right now?
I haven't a single concern.
Well, come on now. What do you care about, really? Don't you care about anything?
Hi, everybody. So happy to participate in this 100th anniversary of Irving Layton's birth. I want to thank Max Layton for inviting me to participate, and I knew that Irving would really have liked this kind of event. He had a very finely honed historical sense, and he really lived in a kind of history of himself, and saw himself as worthy of celebration as we do. In fact, it's such a good idea. I think we should do this again in another 100 years, and I hope Max will invite me again to read a poem. I always said that Irving was our greatest poet and our greatest champion of the whole creative enterprise. There was Irving Layton, and then there was the rest of us. So here's a poem, one of the many that I love, It's called The Graveyard. Lord, I understand the plan. The news is out. I kill him, he kills me. Change and change about. And you ever in the right. And no wonder, since it's no great matter who's up, who's under. Teuton or Slav, Arab or suffering Jew, nature, justice, God, they are all one to you. The lion breeds the lamb and the antelope, as evil breeds good, darkness light, despair hope. And though your scheme confound theologians' wits, all come and go, sired by the opposites. And they decree, he who slays and he who's slain, leave on your excellent world no crimson stain. The tragic, warring creatures that here have breath are reconciled in the partnership of death. And death's akin to art, and artists please to the measure they have stilled the contraries. Energy must crackle on a silent urn, nothing catch fire, though Jerusalem burn. And the lion poised on the poor buck to spring, holds in his furious jaws no suffering. Motion and rest, love and hate, heaven and hell, here cease their punch and Judy show. All is well. There is no pain in the graveyard, or the voice whispering to the tombstones, rejoice, rejoice. It's a wonderful poem. Well, it's great to be here, everybody. Thanks for inviting me, and have a wonderful evening.